Commander Katie Lewis stood at the window of Earth Defense Station Alpha, watching the blue marble of her home planet spin slowly below. The coffee in her metal cup had gone cold an hour ago, but she kept holding it anyway. Her mind was far from the morning routine reports and crew schedules that normally filled her days. 3 days ago, everything changed. A message had arrived through the quantum communication network that connected all the major star systems. It came from the Galactic Council itself, the governing body that ruled over 17 different star systems and hundreds of worlds. Katie had read the message so many times she could recite it from memory. The message was simple but shocking. Earth had been invited to send a representative to appear on The Great Debate, the most watched show in known space. Every intelligent species in the galaxy tuned in when new episodes aired. The show claimed to discuss important issues facing the galactic community, but Katie knew it was really about entertainment and politics. The host was Zeth-9, a tall alien from the Centauri system who had been running the show for over 20 years. His silver skin reflected the studio lights, and his 4 black eyes could focus on different things at the same time. He was famous across the galaxy for his sharp tongue and his ability to make guests look foolish on live television. Katie had been chosen to represent humanity after 3 intense days of meetings at Earth Command. The decision came down from the highest levels of government. They needed someone with military training who could also handle diplomatic situations. Katie had served in the border wars against the Mars rebels and later worked as a liaison officer with the first alien contact teams. She knew how to stay calm under pressure and how to think quickly when things went wrong. But this was different from anything she had faced before. This was not a private meeting or a small negotiation. This would be broadcast live to billions of intelligent beings across 17 star systems. Every word she said would be heard and judged by creatures she had never met, from worlds she had never seen. The other species on the council had been traveling between stars for centuries, before humans even invented the wheel. They had built great cities on distant planets while Earth was still figuring out agriculture. When humanity finally developed faster-than-light travel 15 years ago, it was like a child joining a conversation between adults. Katie walked to her desk and pulled up the files she had been studying. The intelligence reports made for uncomfortable reading. The Great Debate had featured representatives from 12 different species over the past 5 years. Most of them had been made to look like fools. The show's producers seemed to enjoy bringing on representatives from newer spacefaring species and then watching Zeth-9 tear them apart with his questions. The vegan plant people had sent their best diplomat 2 years ago. By the end of the show, he was stuttering and apologizing for his species' slow expansion into space. The rock creatures from the asteroid belt had fared even worse. Their representative had actually walked off the set after Zeth-9 started making jokes about their appearance. But it was not just entertainment. Katie had learned that species who performed poorly on the show often found their trade applications delayed or rejected by the council. Their requests for territory or resources were pushed to the bottom of the pile. The show was a tool for the older, more established species to keep the newer ones in their place. Katie's communication device buzzed. A message from Admiral Jack Morrison, head of Earth Defense Command. She opened it and read the brief text. Final briefing in Conference Room 7 at 1400 hours. Good luck, Commander. She finished her cold coffee and headed for the conference room. The briefing was already in progress when she arrived. Admiral Morrison was standing at the front of the room next to a large display screen showing images from previous episodes of The Great Debate. The pattern is clear, Morrison was saying to the dozen officers seated around the table. They invite a representative from a newer species, ask them impossible questions, and then use their responses to justify treating that species as second-class citizens in galactic affairs. Colonel Mary Santos, the intelligence officer, spoke, up from her seat. Our sources in the Centauri system report that this episode is being promoted heavily. They are calling it the human question and advertising it as a chance for the galaxy to see what Earth is really like. Katie took her seat and listened as the briefing continued. The other officers discussed possible strategies and talking points. They had prepared responses to likely questions about human history, technology, and intentions in space. But Katie could see the worry in their faces. They all knew this was bigger than just one television appearance. The Centauri Coalition has been pushing for limits on human expansion for months, Morrison explained. They claim we are too aggressive and move too fast. If this show goes badly, it could give them the excuse they need to propose formal restrictions on human space travel and trade. The briefing ended with final instructions and wishes for good luck. Katie gathered her materials and prepared to head to the transport that would take her to the Galactic Council station. The trip would take 2 days through hyperspace, giving her time to review her notes and practice her responses. As she walked to the docking bay, Katie thought about the millions of humans living and working throughout the solar system. They were counting on her to represent their interests and their future. She could not let them down. The Galactic Council broadcasting station was massive beyond anything Katie had ever seen. The structure floated in space between 3 different star systems, a neutral zone where representatives from across the galaxy could meet. Her transport ship docked at one of hundreds of bays that lined the outer ring of the station. Katie walked through corridors filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. She passed tall, thin creatures with blue skin and no visible eyes. A group of small, furry aliens chatted in clicking sounds as they moved past her. The air smelled of different atmospheres mixing together, creating a strange combination that made her nose itch. The studio where The Great Debate was filmed took up an entire section of the station. Katie was led to a waiting room where she could see the main stage through a large window. The set was designed like an ancient Earth courtroom, with raised seating for the host and lower chairs for the guests. Bright lights hung from the ceiling and cameras moved on mechanical arms to capture every angle. A small alien with green skin and large ears approached her. "Commander Lewis, I am Grix, the assistant producer. We will begin filming in 30 minutes. Please review these materials one more time." Grix handed her a data pad with information about the other guests who would appear on the show. Katie scrolled through the profiles and felt her stomach tighten. The other 6 representatives were all from species that had been members of the Galactic Council for decades or centuries. There was Ambassador Court from the Rigel system, whose people had been traveling between stars for over 400 years. Representative Yala from the gas giant worlds had led successful trade negotiations with 12 different species. Captain Nexus from the machine civilization had technology that humans could barely understand. Katie realized she was not just the newest representative on the panel. She was also the least experienced. Every other guest had decades of diplomatic experience and represented civilizations that were older and more advanced than humanity. 5 minutes until we go live, announced a voice over the station's communication system. Katie was escorted to her chair on the set. The other representatives were already seated, and most of them ignored her completely. A few gave her curious looks, but no one tried to start a conversation. Zeth 9 emerged from behind the cameras and took his place at the host's podium. Up close, he was even more intimidating than he appeared on screen. His silver skin seemed to glow under the studio lights, and his 4 black eyes moved independently, scanning the guests and the crew. He was tall and thin, with long arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. "Welcome, beings of the galaxy, to another episode of The Great Debate," Zeth 9 said as the cameras began rolling. "Tonight we examine a question that has been on many minds lately. Are the humans of Earth ready to join the community of civilized worlds, or are they still too primitive and dangerous for galactic society?" Katie felt her face flush with anger, but she kept her expression neutral. The question was clearly designed to put her on the defensive from the very start. She had prepared for hostile questions, but hearing the words spoken aloud in front of billions of viewers was different from practicing in a conference room. "Let us begin with our human representative, Commander Katie Lewis," Zeth 9 continued, turning his multiple eyes toward her. "Commander, your species has been traveling between stars for only 15 years. Most civilized worlds take centuries to develop the wisdom needed for interstellar diplomacy. What makes you think humans are ready for full participation in galactic affairs?" Katie took a breath before responding. "Host Zeth 9, humanity may be new to space travel, But we are not new to solving complex problems. In just 15 years, we have established peaceful relations with every species we have encountered. We have contributed medical research that has helped beings across multiple star systems. Our explorers have discovered new trade routes that benefit everyone. Ambassador Court from Rigel laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Medical research? Commander, your species still suffers from diseases that we eliminated centuries ago. Your lifespans are barely a century long. What could you possibly teach us about medicine? Representative Yala joined in. And as for peaceful relations, we have all heard about the Mars Rebellion. Humans fighting other humans over territory and resources. How can we trust a species that cannot even maintain peace within its own solar system? Katie felt the conversation slipping away from her. She had expected tough questions, but this felt like a coordinated attack. The other representatives were not asking genuine questions about human capabilities. They were repeating talking points, designed to make humanity look weak and unstable. Seth-9 smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. Indeed, the Mars situation raises important questions. Let us examine some footage from that conflict. The screens around the studio lit up with images from the Mars Rebellion. But Katie immediately saw that the footage had been edited. The scenes showed human soldiers in combat, but they were cut and arranged to make the fighting look more brutal than it had been. The context was removed, making it seem like humans were naturally violent rather than responding to legitimate grievances about colonial governance. As we can see, Seth-9 said while the images played, humans resort to violence quickly when faced with disagreement. Captain Nexus, does this concern you when considering trade agreements with Earth? The machine representative's electronic voice was cold and precise. Any species that cannot resolve internal disputes peacefully poses a risk to galactic stability. The footage clearly shows that humans prefer military solutions to diplomatic ones. Katie wanted to object, to point out that the footage was misleading and taken out of context. But every time she tried to speak, Seth-9 would ask another question or call on a different guest. The format of the show was designed to keep her reactive rather than allowing her to present humanity's actual achievements and values. The attack continued for 20 more minutes. Every human accomplishment was dismissed or twisted into something negative. When Katie mentioned human art and culture, Representative Yala suggested that primitive species often produced interesting artifacts, but that this did not qualify them for political equality. When she brought up human scientific discoveries, Ambassador Court claimed that younger species sometimes stumbled onto useful information by accident. Katie began to understand that this was not a debate at all. It was a trial, and humanity had already been found guilty. The studio lights dimmed as the great debate went to a commercial break. Katie remained in her chair trying to process what had just happened. The other representatives were chatting among themselves, completely relaxed as if they had just finished a casual conversation rather than a public attack on an entire species. Seth-9 stepped down from his podium and walked toward the production area behind the cameras. Katie could hear him talking to someone, but the words were muffled by the noise of the crew preparing for the next segment. She strained to listen, hoping to get some sense of what was coming next. "Excuse me, Commander Lewis," said a voice behind her. Katie turned to see a young alien with pale purple skin and large dark eyes. The being wore the uniform of a station technician. "I need to check your microphone. Technical difficulties." The technician moved behind Katie's chair and pretended to adjust her microphone equipment. While working, the alien whispered very quietly, "Do not react to what I am about to tell you. They are planning something worse for the next segment. This whole show is a setup by the Centauri Coalition. They want to destroy your species' reputation completely." Katie kept her face blank, but her heart began racing. She had suspected the show was biased, but hearing confirmation that it was actually a planned attack made everything worse. The technician continued working and whispering. "There is a second studio where they film private segments. Seth-9 and his producers meet there during breaks. If you walk toward the bathroom and take the third door on the left, you can hear everything they say. The door does not close completely." The technician finished the fake repair and moved away without another word. Katie sat still for a moment, considering her options. She could stay in her chair and endure whatever they had planned for the next segment, or she could try to gather intelligence about what was really happening. Katie stood up and walked toward the exit, telling the crew she needed to use the bathroom. The corridor outside the main studio was busy with technicians and other station staff. No one paid attention to one more person walking through the halls. She found the third door on the left, just as the technician had described. It was slightly open, and she could hear voices from inside. Katie moved closer and pressed herself against the wall where she could listen without being seen. Zeth-9's voice was clear and confident. The audience response numbers are excellent. Viewership is up 40% from our usual episodes. The coalition will be very pleased with these results. Another voice, probably one of the producers, responded. The human representative is holding up better than we expected. Should we move forward with the Rex Parker segment? Katie's blood went cold. Rex Parker was a name from Earth's darkest recent history. He had been a military commander during the Mars Rebellion, but he had been court-martialed and imprisoned for crimes against civilians. He was not representative of human values or military conduct. Most humans considered him a criminal and a disgrace to the species. Absolutely, Zeth-9 replied. We have the edited footage ready. It will look like Parker was following standard human military procedures rather than acting against orders. The audience will think all human soldiers behave like him. A third voice joined the conversation. The coalition's trade representatives are standing by. As soon as this episode finishes broadcasting, they will submit formal proposals to limit human expansion into the outer rim systems. The council will have plenty of justification to approve the restrictions. Katie realized the full scope of what was happening. This was not just a television show designed to embarrass humanity. It was part of a larger political strategy to prevent human expansion and keep Earth isolated from the galactic community. The Centauri Coalition was using propaganda to manipulate public opinion across multiple star systems. What about the other representatives? Asked the producer. Do they know about the larger plan? Zeth-9 laughed, the same cruel sound Katie had heard during the broadcast. Ambassador Court and the others think they are just participating in a normal episode. They have their own reasons for wanting to keep the humans contained, but they do not know about the coalition's trade proposals. It is better that way. Their reactions will seem more natural. Katie backed away from the door and returned to the studio. Her mind was racing with this new information. She now understood that she was not just defending humanity's reputation. She was fighting for her species' future in space. If the show succeeded in turning galactic opinion against humans, Earth could be trapped in its own solar system for generations. The commercial break was ending, and the crew was preparing to resume filming. Katie took her seat and looked around at her fellow guests. Ambassador Court was checking his notes, probably preparing more attacks on human civilization. Representative Yala was speaking quietly with Captain Nexus, likely coordinating their next questions. None of them knew they were being used by the Centauri Coalition. They thought they were participating in legitimate political discussion, but they were actually helping to destroy human opportunities across the galaxy. Katie wondered if they would care about the truth, or if they were too invested in maintaining their own species' advantages. Zeth-9 returned to his podium and signaled to the crew. The cameras began rolling again, and the host's multiple eyes focused on Katie with what looked like anticipation. He was excited about whatever he had planned for this segment. Welcome back to the Great Debate, Zeth-9 announced to the cameras. We have been discussing whether humanity is ready for full participation in galactic society. So far, we have heard about human medical research, scientific discoveries, and cultural achievements. But now we must examine the darker side of human nature. Katie felt her stomach clench. This was the moment the technician had warned her about. Whatever came next would be designed to completely destroy human credibility in the eyes of billions of viewers. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, Zeth-9 continued, I present to you evidence of how humans really behave when they face conflict. This footage comes from your own military archives, Commander Lewis. Perhaps you can explain to our audience why your species promotes such behavior. The screens around the studio began showing footage of Rex Parker during the Mars Rebellion. But as Katie watched, She could see exactly what the producers had done. They had edited out all the context that would show Parker was acting against orders and against human military law. They had removed the parts where other human soldiers tried to stop him. They had cut out his court-martial and imprisonment. To viewers who did not know the full story, it would look like Rex Parker was a typical human military officer following standard procedures. It would appear that all human soldiers were trained to act with the same brutality and disregard for civilian life. Katie watched the edited footage of Rex Parker playing on the screens around the studio. The images showed human soldiers engaged in brutal combat, but every piece of context that would explain the true situation had been removed. To billions of viewers across the galaxy, it would look like standard human military behavior rather than the actions of a criminal who had been court-martialed by his own people. "Commander Lewis," Zeth-9 said, his four eyes focusing on her with obvious satisfaction, "can you explain to our audience why your military promotes such savage tactics? This footage comes directly from your own archives." Katie felt anger building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Host Zeth-9, that footage has been heavily edited. Rex Parker was not following standard human military procedures. He was acting against direct orders from his superiors. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life imprisonment by human military courts." Ambassador Court leaned forward in his chair. "But Commander, if your military truly opposed such behavior, why do these actions appear in your official archives? Surely your people would have destroyed evidence of such embarrassing conduct." "We keep records of our failures as well as our successes," Katie replied. "Humans believe that hiding from our mistakes makes us more likely to repeat them. The footage exists because we want future generations to understand what happens when soldiers forget their duty to protect innocent lives." Representative Yala made a dismissive gesture with her long, thin arms. "How convenient. You claim this individual was acting against orders, but we only have your word for that. The footage shows humans engaged in exactly the kind of behavior we would expect from a primitive species." Katie realized that no matter what she said, they would twist her words to support their predetermined conclusion. The other representatives were not interested in the truth about Rex Parker or about human military conduct. They were performing for the cameras, giving the audience exactly what they expected to hear. Zeth-9 smiled his sharp-toothed smile. "Let us examine another aspect of human behavior. Your species has been in space for only 15 years, yet you have already established settlements on dozens of worlds. Some would call this rapid expansion aggressive and potentially threatening to established civilizations." Captain Nexus spoke in his cold electronic voice. "My people have monitored human expansion patterns. You establish colonies and mining operations at a rate that exceeds the galactic average by 300%. This suggests either desperation or aggression." Katie had heard enough. She stood up from her chair, interrupting Zeth-9 as he prepared to ask another loaded question. The host looked surprised, and the other representatives turned to stare at her. "I need to address something that has not been mentioned in this discussion," Katie said, looking directly into the main camera. "This entire show is a propaganda operation designed to justify political and economic restrictions on human expansion." Zeth-9's expression changed from surprise to anger. "Commander Lewis, you are here as a guest. Please return to your seat and answer the questions." "No," Katie replied firmly. "I will not sit here and allow you to spread lies about my species to billions of viewers. The footage you just showed was edited to remove crucial context. Rex Parker was a criminal who was punished by human law. He does not represent human values any more than the war criminals from other species represent theirs." She turned to face Ambassador Court. "Your own people fought a civil war that lasted 50 years and killed millions of your own citizens. Should we judge all Rigelians by the actions of your worst leaders during that conflict?" Ambassador Court's face flushed a darker shade of blue. "That is completely different. Our civil war was a complex political situation that outside observers could not understand." "Exactly," Katie said. "Just as outside observers cannot understand the Mars rebellion without proper context. But this show is not interested in context or truth. It is interested in creating a specific narrative about humanity. Representative Yala stood up as well, her voice rising with indignation. "Commander, you are making very serious accusations. Do you have evidence to support these claims?" Katie looked around the studio, knowing that her next words would either save humanity's future or destroy it completely. She had to take the risk. During the commercial break, I overheard host Zeth9 speaking with his producers. They discussed how this episode was commissioned by the Centauri Coalition to provide justification for trade restrictions against Earth. They talked about manipulating footage and coordinating with political representatives to limit human expansion into the outer rim systems. The studio fell silent. Zeth9's four eyes were all focused on Katie now, and his expression had turned dangerous. The other representatives looked confused and uncertain. "Those are extremely serious accusations," Captain Nexus said in his mechanical voice. "If true, they would represent a significant breach of galactic broadcasting ethics." Zeth9 tried to regain control of the situation. "Commander Lewis is clearly attempting to deflect attention from legitimate questions about human behavior. These conspiracy theories are exactly the kind of paranoid thinking we would expect from a primitive species." But Katie was not finished. She had spent weeks studying the backgrounds of every species represented on the panel, and she had information that none of them expected her to know. "Let me tell you about some other things that have not been mentioned tonight," she said, still standing and addressing the camera directly. "The Centauri Coalition has suppressed 3 different species over the past 2 centuries. They used economic pressure and political manipulation to prevent these species from developing independent space travel capabilities." Katie turned to face Zeth9 directly. "Your own people, host Zeth9, have territories that were taken from the vegan plant people through a series of one-sided trade agreements. The vegans were forced to give up their most fertile worlds in exchange for outdated technology and empty promises of future cooperation." The host's silver skin was beginning to show dark patches, a sign of stress in his species. "Commander Lewis, you are making baseless accusations that have no relevance to tonight's discussion." "They are completely relevant," Katie replied. "This show is supposed to be about whether humans are ready for galactic society. But the real question is whether galactic society is ready to accept that newer species can be equals rather than subjects to be controlled and exploited." She looked at each of the other representatives in turn. "Ambassador Court, your people have been blocking mineral rights applications from 6 different species for the past decade. Representative Yala, your gas giant colonies were built on territory that belonged to the crystal beings before your people arrived and claimed it was empty space." The other representatives were shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. They had not expected their own histories to become part of the discussion. Katie faced the camera again. "Every species in this galaxy has a history of conflict, expansion, and mistakes. The difference is that humans are honest about our failures and work to do better. We do not hide behind propaganda and manipulation to maintain advantages over other species." The studio remained silent for several seconds after Katie finished speaking. Zeth9 stood frozen at his podium, his 4 eyes darting between Katie and the cameras. The other representatives looked uncomfortable, unsure how to respond to having their own species' dark histories exposed on live television. Captain Nexus was the first to break the silence. His electronic voice carried a note of calculation that had not been there before. "Commander Lewis has raised serious questions about the purpose of this broadcast. If her accusations are accurate, then we are all being manipulated." Representative Yala shifted in her chair, her long arms wrapping around herself defensively. "Even if some of what she says is true, it does not change the fact that humans are expanding too quickly. The concerns about human aggression are still valid." Katie remained standing, her voice steady and clear. "Our expansion is not aggressive, it is necessary. Earth has 8 billion people, and our home system can only support so many colonies. We expand because we need resources and living space, not because we want to conquer other species." She gestured toward the screens that had shown the edited footage of Rex Parker. "Every human settlement we have established has been on uninhabited worlds or in systems that were not claimed by other species. We have followed every galactic law and protocol. We have paid fair prices for mining rights and territorial licenses. We have shared our medical research and our agricultural techniques with every species that asked for them. Ambassador Court tried to interrupt. But the speed of your expansion suggests that you are not considering the long-term consequences of your actions. The long-term consequences? Katie asked, turning to face him directly. Let me tell you about long-term consequences. The Centauri Coalition wants to limit human expansion so they can maintain control over the trade routes we have discovered. They want to keep us dependent on their technology and their financial systems. She walked closer to the camera, addressing the billions of viewers directly. Every species watching this broadcast should ask themselves a simple question. When your people were new to space travel, did the established civilizations welcome you as equals? Or did they try to control your growth and limit your opportunities? Zeth 9 finally found his voice, but it sounded strained and uncertain. Commander Lewis, you are making claims that cannot be verified during a live broadcast. These conspiracy theories are exactly the kind of paranoid behavior that concerns the galactic community about human psychology. Katie smiled for the first time since the show began. They can be verified very easily. I challenge you to deny that this episode was commissioned by the Centauri Coalition. I challenge you to deny that your producers edited the Rex Parker footage to remove the context that would show he was acting as a criminal rather than as a representative of human military values. The silence stretched for several more seconds. Zeth 9 looked toward his producers who were standing behind the cameras making urgent gestures. It was clear that he had not expected to be put on the defensive during his own show. Captain Nexus spoke again, his mechanical voice now carrying what sounded like respect. Commander Lewis has demonstrated exactly the kind of direct communication and logical thinking that would be valuable in galactic politics. Her willingness to confront difficult truths, even when it puts her at a disadvantage, suggests that humans may indeed be ready for full participation in the galactic community. Representative Yala looked surprised by Captain Nexus's statement. But she has been combative and accusatory throughout this entire segment. She has been honest, Captain Nexus replied. When faced with coordinated attacks and manipulated evidence, she responded with facts and direct challenges. This is preferable to the political maneuvering and hidden agendas that have become common in galactic affairs. Katie could see the change happening in real time. The studio audience of alien dignitaries was murmuring among themselves, and some of them were nodding in agreement with Captain Nexus. Her refusal to accept the predetermined narrative was resonating with beings who had experienced similar treatment when their own species were new to galactic politics. Zeth 9 made one final attempt to regain control of the broadcast. We are running out of time for this episode. Commander Lewis, do you have any final words for our audience? Katie looked directly into the main camera, knowing that this might be humanity's only chance to speak directly to the galactic community without filters or manipulation. To every species watching this broadcast, I want you to know that humans come to the galaxy in friendship. We do not seek to dominate or control other civilizations. We want to trade, to learn, and to contribute to the common good of all intelligent life. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But we will not accept second-class status. We will not allow our expansion to be artificially limited by species who fear competition or change. We will not apologize for being new to space travel or for learning quickly. Katie's voice grew stronger as she continued. Humanity offers partnership, not submission. We offer cooperation, not subservience. If the established civilizations of this galaxy want to work with us, they will find us to be loyal allies and valuable partners. If they want to restrict us or control us, they will find us to be determined opponents. The cameras continued rolling as Katie delivered her final statement. The choice is yours, leaders of the galactic community. You can welcome humanity as equals and benefit from everything we have to offer. Or you can try to keep us contained and face the consequences of treating 8 billion intelligent beings as second-class citizens. She sat down, her part in the broadcast complete. Zeth 9 fumbled through his closing remarks, clearly shaken by how completely the show had deviated from his planned script. The other representatives made brief statements, but their words seemed hollow after Katie's direct challenge. When the cameras stopped rolling, the studio buzzed with activity. Producers were shouting into communication devices, and the alien dignitaries in the audience were engaged in heated discussions. Katie remained in her chair, knowing that she had done everything possible to defend humanity's interests. 3 days later, Katie stood once again at the window of Earth Defense Station Alpha. But this time, she was not alone. Admiral Morrison was beside her, holding a datapad filled with messages from across the galaxy. 12 species have requested direct trade negotiations with Earth, Morrison said, his voice filled with amazement. The vegan plant people want to establish a mutual defense treaty. The crystal beings are offering to share their energy technology in exchange for our medical research. Katie smiled as she watched ships from different worlds docking at the station's bays. What about the Centauri Coalition? Their trade restriction proposals were voted down in the Galactic Council by a margin of 3-1, Morrison replied. Several council members cited your broadcast as evidence that humanity is ready for full membership. The vote for our admission is scheduled for next month. Katie nodded, feeling satisfied but not surprised. And Zeth 9? Morrison's smile was, crazy. His show has been canceled. Independent journalists confirmed your accusations about the edited footage and the coalition's involvement. He is facing charges for violating galactic broadcasting ethics. As Katie watched another alien transport ship dock at the station, she thought about the young representative who would soon face their own first appearance before the galactic community. She made a mental note to offer them the same advice that had served her well. Stand up for your people. Tell the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. And never accept that being new means being inferior.